Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mount St. Mary's University. My name is Melanie Sava, and I am the president of the Student Government Association here at Mount St. Mary's. It is our pleasure today to host this important discussion with the U.S. Secretary of Education, John King, as well as Mount St. Mary's own alum, Alejandra Ceja, who is the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for Hispanics. Secretary King has a unique perspective on the challenges facing first-generation college students, and he is here for you. So a little bit about the way that this will work. After a few brief remarks, Secretary King and Ms. Ceja will open it up to questions and comments from you. This is your opportunity not only to ask questions, but also to share your life experiences, challenges, or any obstacles that you may have faced or are facing as you all work to achieve your goal of a college education. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, Arturo Carmona of Me Too, Executive Director Alejandra Ceja, and the United States Secretary of Education, John B. King.
How's everybody doing? Buenas tardes todos, ¿cómo estamos? Pues es un real placer estar aquí con ustedes. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you to discuss college access, affordability, and really the tools that we all need to succeed in college. You know, it's always so exciting to come out and meet with young students. I had the pleasure of being on a presidential campaign not too long ago. And I was interacting with students every day, with college students, hearing the stories and talking about some of the issues that we're going to talk about today. And it's so important to have these conversations. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk to all of you and answer questions and really dive deep into these important issues. My name is Arturo Carmona, and I am the head of Community Engagement and Public Affairs with Me Too, which is a digital engagement media company really focused on connecting with people like you, young Latinos, to talk about not only funny and engaging content, but also issues that impact your everyday lives, like education, like higher education. And so when the secretary and his team came up to us and they're like, hey, can you guys help out to amplify these important resources and these important tools to address critical issues impacting the Latino community, we're like, we'll be there. Claro que lo vamos a hacer. And so I'm really excited to have some very distinguished guests here with us today. Secretary John King is the U.S. Secretary of Education. In selecting him as the U.S. To lead the U.S. Department of Education, President Obama called Dr. King an exceptionally talented educator, citing his commitment to preparing every child for success and his lifelong dedication as a teacher, principal, and leader of schools and school systems. So, you know, he's been long at this, really advocating for communities of color, for underprivileged students. In his last position within the Department of Education, he really focused on overseeing all preschool through 12th grade education policies and programs, as well as department operations. So we're blessed to have Secretary John King here with us, who is also African-American and also Puerto Riqueño, and served previously as the New York State Education Commissioner, a post he held from 2011 to 2015. So, Secretary King, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you all for being here for this conversation. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk about college access, affordability, and completion, all of which have been priorities for the President and the First Lady from the beginning. And I hope we'll talk today about some of the ways that we've worked to expand access. I hope we'll talk today about the important investment that college is and the way that Those who graduate from college are going to make more than $1 million more over the course of their careers, and so it's one of the best investments that you can make in yourself. And we want to talk today specifically about tools and resources the department is providing to help students and families access college opportunity. So I have my colleague, Alejandra Ceja, here with me, who's going to talk briefly about the guide that we're announcing today, which we hope will be a resource for all of you. And I look forward to the conversation. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos, ¿cómo están? Bien. ¿Dónde está la energía? ¿Cómo están? It's such an honor to be home. I'm originally from Huntington Park, not too far from here, and a graduate of the Mount, so really excited to be here. And to be rolling out a guide that is really meant for you all, for our Latino community to be better prepared to make informed decisions about college access, and most importantly, we want to continue to have a national dialogue about Latinos in education. So Graduate 2.0 is being released today, so you all are kind of getting the sneak peek at this guide, and I hope that you will help our office disseminate it to your friends and your family members. We really need to get it into the hands of students so that we can continue to talk about the importance not just of college, but how do you plan for college? How do you pay for it? And most importantly, how can you step on campus confident, knowing that you have the tools necessary? So I'm really excited. Graduate 2.0, you can download it off of our website, ed.gov Hispanic Initiative, and we're going to make sure that there's also copies available. But for me, it's just an honor to make sure that we hear from you all. So this is really an opportunity for us to kind of get the conversation going, because this helps us with the 3.0 version that we know we need. And I'll just let you know, the guide is special because it is written from the perspective of first-generation college students who come to intern at our White House initiative. So they kind of keep us current and tell us, well, I wish I would have known this when I stepped onto campus, and I wish my parents would have had this information. So the cover is dedicated to those college students, all those Latinos that have come through our office and contributed un pedacito de lo que ellos han experienciado en el colegio. So it's an honor to also celebrate their journey and tell their story.
Thank you, Alejandra. Before we open it up for questions from the audience and from all of you, I really want to ask a couple questions. First, to both of you, Secretary King and Alejandra, I know you both have very powerful personal stories that work very important to you and were very important to you. Secretary King, can you start by telling us a little bit about your personal journey and individuals and experiences that have influenced you at the community level, teachers or other individuals that really shaped your path?
Sure. So I grew up in Brooklyn in New York City, and New York City public school teachers saved my life. It's because of them that I'm sitting here today. It's because of them that I'm alive today. When I was 8, I was going to PS 276 in Canarsie, Brooklyn, and my mom passed away. It was October of my 4th grade year, and I lived with my dad, who was quite sick with undiagnosed Alzheimer's. And so on any given night, I didn't know what home was going to be like. From one night to the next, my father's personality was different. Sometimes it was scary. But school was this place that was safe and nurturing and supportive. And I had amazing teachers at PS 276 and at Mark Twain Junior High School in Coney Island who made school a place where I could be a kid when I couldn't be a kid outside of school. Then my dad passed away when I was 12, and I moved around between family members and schools, and always school was the place that I could count on for consistency and for inspiration. You know, I can remember Mr. Osterweiler, my teacher in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, who had us doing Shakespeare in elementary school. We read the New York Times every day. We went to the ballet and the museum. And he showed us all these things beyond Canarsie, Brooklyn. He gave me a sense that there was some possibility outside of just my neighborhood and my experience. And those teachers invested in me. And they very easily could have said, you know, here's an African, Latino, male student going to New York City public school, family in crisis, what chance does he have? And they could have given up on me. But they didn't. They invested in me. And really it's because of those teachers that I became a teacher and a principal, because I wanted to try to do for other kids what my teachers had done for me. And I just feel very blessed to have had them in my life. And I know there are some of you who are going to be teachers, and thank you, because teachers make a huge difference in students' lives.
Alejandra, do you want to share a little bit with us?
Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in Huntington Park, not too far from here. Soy hija de padres mexicanos inmigrantes. And growing up, my parents didn't have a lot of information. They didn't talk about FAFSA. They didn't talk about going to college. I'm one of 5 kids, so my older sister got the brunt of really trying to challenge them to say that it was okay for her to enroll in college. So by the time it got to me, they were like, vete al colegio, like, te vas a ir. They were really like, they understood. But I think of my older sister and her journey. She was trying to go to a summer bridge program that they had at Cal State LA, and my parents were just so afraid of letting her leave the house to go 10 miles away from where we grew up. So the work that I'm able to do now is really being able to make sure that we can have resources that are culturally relevant for our parents and for our siblings and for our community. And for me, growing up in LA at the time, there wasn't a lot of talk about Latinos succeeding or Latinas working in Washington, D.C. or working at the White House. But the Mount really gave me the platform to believe that I could do it. I grew up going to an overcrowded public school. And when I came to the Mount, my first class was a leadership class. And I walked in and I sat in the back of the room. And the teacher, Dr. Cheryl Mabey, said, "What are you doing? There's only 10 people in the class. Siéntate enfrente." And it really just helped me get out of my shell, and it helped challenge me. And I ended up studying political science and was really involved in the leadership office and got introduced to Washington, D.C. And I told my family that I was going away to do a 9-month fellowship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And I was sharing with Arturo that it's been 18 years and I'm still in D.C. But it's been a wonderful journey, and I just think these forums really give us an opportunity to share our stories and to really help inform the work that the Secretary gets to do in terms of making policies that really impact our community.
You know, I have a similar story as it relates to our parents, right? Sometimes going to college can be this abstract notion for a lot of our family and a lot of our parents, because, you know, a lot of times we're the first one to go to college. So, you know, all these processes, all these applications, FAFSA, you know, this foreign concept. So what advice would you give to students, Dr. King, Secretary King, who are considering applying to college? You know, what role does FAFSA have to play? What types of resources should they be looking for?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's most important is to start early, right? And to get information early about colleges and about financial aid. And there are 2 resources that are important that the department has. One is the College Scorecard. It's at collegescorecard.ed.gov. And the College Scorecard gives information about how much colleges cost, how students do after they graduate, how much they earn after they graduate, how able they are to pay back any loans after they graduate, and it has links to other information about the colleges and the kinds of programs that are offered. And so that's one important tool. But researching the college options, I know we have some high school students here, researching the college options, critical, right? And figuring out what's the right place for you. Financial aid information, critical to get that early. We just launched the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, on October 1st. So for the current college students, you know that used to start on January 1, and you used to have to figure out all your parents' tax information, right, even though they hadn't filed their taxes yet. So now it starts on October 1, so it's already available. So if you haven't filled it out, you should. And you're allowed to use information from the prior year's taxes. So for this year, for example, you can use 2015 tax information, which means you can download the information directly from the IRS. It is a much faster process. It used to take an hour, maybe more, maybe multiple hours if you had to gather all the materials. Now it's down to about 20, 30 minutes. And it's designed to be as efficient as possible. And the reason to do it early is that the FAFSA is not only the first step to accessing federal funding, like Pell Grants for low-income families, as well as federal loans, but often the FAFSA is also used by states and by universities to decide how much aid they can give as well. And so filling out the FAFSA is really the first step. Every year, some organizations estimate as much as $2 billion is left unclaimed by students, that they could get $2 billion with a B, that money they could get, but they don't fill out the FAFSA, and so they don't take advantage. We also see sometimes current college students forget that they need to do the FAFSA each year, and they miss out on aid that they should be getting. So that's a very important process as well.
Great. Alejandra, we've seen important progress in the number of Latinos going to college, both 2-year and 4-year institutions, but we're still, despite that important progress, we're still seeing that folks aren't completing at important rates in the Latino community. What advice would you give folks here and for folks listening to us live in terms of tools? How can they prepare? What can they be doing to address this important challenge?
I definitely think that student support services are key. Students that are, especially for our high school students that are able to participate in our Gear Up and our Upward Bound programs. There's communities that are introducing kids at the high school to the local colleges so that they can take courses. So that kind of helps take away a little bit of like the fear. But the advice I would give students and parents is that there's resources available. Information should not be a barrier. I have the opportunity to travel across the country and talk to students and parents. And I can count the number of times I've heard students say, I was lucky that a teacher told me about the FAFSA. I was lucky that somebody encouraged me when I was in my first year of college to look into work study. And so we shouldn't have to rely on luck. And I think that's the purpose of our office, so that we can really get to completion, is making sure that we have access to all of the tools and information that's coming out of the Department of Education, that we know about how to use the college scorecard or what the college navigator is, that we know about the student support services that our campuses offer. So it's really helpful for us to have first-generation college students that are talking to us about how they feel connected on their campus and the support service they have, so that we can share it with other students and we can talk about how do we leverage our best practices. So the best advice I would give is that there is a president and a secretary that really want to get you to the finish line, and so we are doing everything we can to make sure we simplify FAFSA, that we invest in Pell, that we invest in college access and the conversation on affordability and for the Latino community completion. Many times I meet students that say, well, I ended up dropping out of college because I had to help my family financially. And when you start bringing in the community and the support the community can play, it really helps us say, okay, well, you have to help out your family. Did you know that there is a work-study program? Or did you know that there's other resources? Or we could help you. So I think many times it's just talking about those challenges we're facing to our college counselors, our teachers, so that we can have and continue to build that support that is so needed.
You know, you mentioned FAFSA and Pell, and you know, some of these things might appear foreign concepts to some of our parents. The FAFSA, you know, the financial aid application. What kind of advice would you give parents? But also, if you could speak a little bit about this guide, right? Mm-hmm. The Graduate guide that's was referenced earlier, and the type of information that's in there that could be easy to use for parents to understand some of these concepts that sometimes, you know, people are afraid of. Hey, how are we gonna? ¿Cómo vamos a pagar la universidad? How are we gonna pay for it? Understanding that there's so much resources out there at the state, but also, of course, at the federal level. If you guys could speak to that before we open it up to the audience.
Well, the guide is really meant to help drive the conversation if you're a high school student on what you need when you're in high school to plan for college. And there's great information. We link into a parent tool guide that the department put out that basically puts out those questions. My parents never wanted to go to my school because they were afraid, they didn't speak the language. So we have questions in Spanish for parents to ask so that they can stay informed about their child's academic progress. So we're really trying to let them know, like, estas son las preguntas que había de preguntarle a la maestra. The guide is really a step-by-step process. What you need, AP courses, what are they, the importance of, and the differences between a Pell Grant, which is money you don't repay, and a student loan or a private loan. But really just kind of demystifying the process for both the students and the parents to have a conversation on, you know, what's next after high school. And then we asked the students that helped us write it, we asked them about that first year that is so critical. What is it that you need to know to feel confident when you get on a campus? So the guide really kind of helps us talk about planning, enrolling, financing your college education, and most importantly, graduating, and those kind of recommendations and organizations we know that are also offering scholarships that are really important. And there's a segment in it for our undocumented students that talks about the resources that's available to them as well. So really, it's a guide to help us continue the conversation in our households and with each other, so that we can continue to make sure that information does not become a barrier for our success. So I'm looking forward to your input. You can send us input on the guide and what you'd like to see, especially those high school students. I hope that you use it, and I hope you share it with your parents. It's available in English and Spanish. And we
great.
really just try to make sure that that it is culturally relevant and that it does link to everything that Secretary King and the leaders at the Department of Ed are doing to help us have this national conversation on the importance of college access, affordability, and completion.
Yeah, this is such an important conversation. I don't know if you want to add
Yeah, the thing I would add is just start, right? So if you're a high school senior and you haven't done the FAFSA yet, like leave here today, go home, FAFSA.gov, and just start. Because the hardest thing sometimes is just the first step of starting the application, and then you'll see what the questions are, and there's a version in Spanish if your parents want to use that. So there's a way to just get started, and then you'll figure out what you need. You can also tweet questions to @FAFSA, and we'll respond with answers to the questions that you have as you're completing the application. So just start. Same with the college scorecard. You know, you may have in mind 2 or 3 colleges that you're thinking about. Go on collegescorecard.ed.gov, look at those colleges, find out information about them. That'll lead you to other colleges that might be similar that you'll be interested in. But the key thing is not to procrastinate, right? And I know from having been a high school teacher sometimes, in high school, sometimes you can procrastinate around things. Don't procrastinate, get started.
Well, thank you. We're going to actually open it up to the audience for questions. How do we want to do this? Where should we start? We have a mic up here. So who would like to start with a question?
Can I go first real quick? I'm so sorry. Can I go first? Is that cool with everybody? Can I go first real quick? Yeah? Is that you? All right, good. I just think it's like really important that you guys are here and take advantage of this. My name is Alejandro Rosas, aka DJ Horchata. I'm a graduate from like the drink. How many people are going to college? Yeah. How many people went to college? How many people went to college? Yeah, cool. All right, cool. I went to college too. It's one of the best times of my life. I've learned so much. I went to Cal State LA, Chico State, and UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley, go Bears. Hey. I studied journalism and television and film, and if you guys are debating about not going to college, I think you guys do it. Just apply for financial aid so they could give you food and books and clothes and DJ gear to buy records and stuff. But yeah, it's one of the best experiences ever, and I wrote down my question so I won't mess up. But so I studied journalism. I'm involved with technology a lot. And technology is becoming a big factor in our lives. You know, we use Snapchat all the time, Instagram, Facebook, and these new platforms are coming out. but technology is also becoming a big component in education and in overall society. Latinos are vastly underrepresented in the media, Silicon Valley, and we see it underrepresented in movies, but virtually in every tech field out there. What can we do to better ensure that Latinos are represented in this space, in technology spaces? And how are you guys going to also transport this new FAFSA guide to us? Thank you.
Great. Let me start, and then I'll let Alejandra add. So I worry a lot about the underrepresentation of people of color in the tech industry and science, technology, engineering, and math in general. There are a few things we can do. One is the president proposed a $4 billion investment in computer science education because we think all schools should offer access to computer science, because technology isn't just about the technology industry. Technology is being used in everything from healthcare to manufacturing. So we got to persuade Congress to make that investment, but we think that's important. It needs to start even with elementary school, students having exposure to computer science. 2, we need more math and science teachers, and teachers who know technology and can teach that. So those of you who are thinking about becoming teachers, we need high school math teachers, high school science teachers. We need computer science teachers. One of the biggest obstacles to expanding computer science education is not having enough qualified computer science teachers. We also need more students who start in those fields to finish, and this is really an equity problem in universities. And so if you look at what happens on many campuses, students start out studying math or science or computer science or engineering, but they don't end up staying in the program through to the end. And that's in part about the colleges needing to provide more support to students to help make sure that they don't just start but finish in those degree areas. So we're doing a lot of work on this, but we need colleges to step up and do more. And we also need you to be leaders. Those of you who are in college, to go back to your school district and ask what they're doing to make sure that students have access to opportunity. We know, for example, that Latino students are disproportionately likely to go to high schools where you can't even take Algebra 2 or chemistry or physics, not to mention AP classes or international baccalaureate classes. That's an equity problem. All students should have access to those courses if we want to have diverse technology field, a diverse engineering field. So we need your leadership as well. Alex, what would you add?
I completely agree. One of the things that our office has the opportunity to do is use a lot of the data that comes out that helps us address the equity issue. We have an Office of Civil Rights, and they do this biannual collection of data that gives us information on which communities are not offering the full range of STEM courses. So when we go into communities that have a large population of Latino students, we ask those questions because we are able to use that data to say, did you know that you're not offering the full range of STEM courses? So how are we going to prepare that next generation of Latino leaders in tech if we're not preparing them? So we're able to really kind of dive down and use the tools and information that comes out of the department to have these conversations. We've done events with key industry partners and to talk about how are you going to open and create a pipeline for Latino leaders. We did an event at Pixar 2 years ago to talk about what they do and how it has a STEM component and how they can reach out to their neighboring schools. And the simple thing of having one of the employees just talk about how they started and how they got to their career. Really trying to challenge and get more folks to go into classrooms to talk about their journey. We all have a story to tell, and let me tell you, if you're having a bad day, go into any elementary classroom. Those kids will make you feel so good. They really are they're sponges. They're taking in this information, and to just be able to share your journey of how you became DJ Horchata, right? It really makes a difference. So we really use the data to drive the conversation to make sure that we can talk about opportunity and really kind of tear down those barriers. So the first question to ask, and I tell parents, ask if they're offering the full range of STEM courses, and there's always education town halls, the school superintendents or teachers. We can really drive the conversation and focus on what really matters.
Great. Okay, we're going to take a few more questions from the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Arlene Valdez. I am a Mount St. Mary's pre-nursing major student, class of 2020. And first of all, I would like to thank Secretary King and Ms. Ceja and Mr. Arturo for being here today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your presence at the Mount. Being a first-generation college student, it has been really important for me to succeed throughout all my educational courses, throughout elementary, middle school, and high school, and now in college. And I think we speak for all of the students that it's really important to do well academically. One of the obstacles that I had to go through my first year of college was transitioning from high school to college. You know, the workload, the amount of intensity that you have to put into your classes, the time management that has to be considered was a lot. And I was fortunate that I found various programs on campus, one of the programs being ISE, that stands for Institutional Advancement for Students, that has really helped me become a stronger student academically and, you know, in all aspects of my life. And I've been able to grow because of that. And one of the questions that I have is, how are the programs that you are proposing for education going to help students who are transitioning into college, coming right out of high school, so that they can succeed, and especially in public schools? Because attending a public high school, I had a really good educational support system, and I was lucky because of that. But I know that other public schools may not be as lucky, and especially for students going into public colleges or universities, how will they be able to feel that support and guidance? And another side question for Mr. King, do you see community college or college in general being free for students in the future? Is that a possibility? Thank you.
Great. So thanks for the question. So I'll start with the high school transition to college. So one of the things that's really important is to start in high school. And it's one of the reasons we encourage high schools and incentivize with grants high schools to have programs like advanced placement or international baccalaureate so that they can start having college work for students while they're in high school. We also are allowing a set of universities and high schools to test out using Pell Grants for students while they're in high school so that they can enroll, do dual enrollment where they enroll jointly in high school and in college at the same time and can start taking college classes. We think that's another opportunity to make that transition more smooth. The President also has a grant program that's focused on improving completion, because we know that a lot of times the students who get to campus and are overwhelmed freshman year end up not staying. And students who don't stay and finish then end up with sometimes debt from school, but they don't have the degree, so they can't get a good job, and they're just trapped in a cycle. So the President has a grant program called First in the World, which is about making the United States first in the world in college graduation. And the idea there is to support things like summer bridge programs, the kinds of support that you were describing that you got here at Mount St. Mary's, that kind of support, whether it's counseling around course selection, academic advising, time management, all those kinds of supports. We know that when colleges provide those supports, students are much more likely to graduate. On the topic of college tuition, President's proposed America's College Promise, the idea that the first 2 years of community college or the first 2 years at a Hispanic serving institution like a Mount St. Mary's, or a minority serving institution, or a historically black college and university, those first 2 years would be free. And the idea is to try to make it so that the first 2 years of college are as universal as K through 12. Right? There was a time in the United States when high school education wasn't really universal, and we committed as a country to make it available to everyone, and the President has the same vision around the first 2 years of college. And I think over time we can also work to ensure that students can go to college in a way that's affordable, that minimizes how much debt they have when they finish. One of the partners we need is states. And one of the challenges we've seen around the country is sometimes states have been cutting back on their investment in public higher education, which is a real problem because those costs get passed on to students and families. So we are hoping that we can get some progress with Congress after the election on America's College Promise, the President's proposal. And we look forward to a future where college is even more affordable than we've been able to make it over the last 8 years.
I would just add the work that our White House initiative is doing is really trying to bring attention to those nonprofit organizations, there's community-based organizations that work with our high school students that offer mentoring, that offer kind of pre-college counseling. So last year we launched this initiative, and it's called Bright Spots. We want to talk about what's working. So it's a catalog, it's an online catalog of organizations that are supporting the Latino community from cradle to career. What are they doing to invest in early learning? What are they doing to invest in parent engagement? There's great organizations like LA's Promise that is highlighted as a bright spot. And so we're able to go into the community to really talk about meaningful partnerships that can help our high schools and can help our local community colleges and universities work together. We've done stuff in Memphis, Tennessee, where we're working with a university and a nonprofit that is helping provide scholarship resources to undocumented students. We've done stuff in North Carolina where we're talking about college access. So there's a lot to really leverage in terms of what's out there and what are other communities doing. And so that's one of the initiatives that our office is continuing to push through, is to really have a discussion about what's happening in California that we can model in those communities where you're seeing a growth of Hispanic students. And so it's Bright Spots online catalog. Take a look at it. I think there's some really good best practices, and there's a lot of Los Angeles-based organizations that are doing good work.
Awesome. All right. I think we have one right here, and then we have another one over here. If you can just come on up if you want. Maybe we can do ask 2 questions to take as many as we can, and then we'll have the answers provided right after.
Hi, my name is Gloria Ramos-Gonzalez, and I'm a Mount St. Mary's alum. I work in education. I've been in education for over 20 years. And my question is about how to broaden the conceptualization for entry to college on standardized testing and achievement tests. I mean, we've perpetually, for the last 20 years, this deficit perspective on how Latinos and minority students do on these tests. Yet I still see it here as one of the requirements. What are you doing, or what's your office doing to broaden those conceptualizations so that isn't the only factor that many elite schools use to gatekeep Latinos from getting into elite schools?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and ask the other question as well. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Susan Martinez. I'm a 4th-year student at UCLA. So just to give a little bit of background to my question, I'm the chairperson for the Student-Initiated Outreach Committee. What we do is that we outreach to communities of color and students that are underrepresented in higher education. We provide mentoring, tutoring, and we also provide them with support in the application process and field trips to go and see universities around California. I work at a multicultural center called the Community Programs Office, where we provide both retention support for people of color, for students of color at UCLA. And I personally am more involved in the outreach side, since I am the chairperson for the outreach side. My question is, are there any initiatives to support programs that are already existing that do go out into communities of color and provide this type of support? This is all student-based, and a lot of times we have to apply for grants to get transportation to go out into the communities, to provide lunches for families that come and visit UCLA, and basically get them thinking about higher education. Mm-hmm. So are there any initiatives to help support programs that are already existing?
Okay, thank you.
Great. So on the first question, you know, our view, and the President has talked a fair amount about this, is that standardized testing should only be one lens among multiple lenses that we use to look at student performance. And our view has always been that we should use multiple indicators to look at student performance. I think one of the challenges is that access to opportunities are not equitably distributed. And so unfortunately, many times, students of color, low-income students, are in schools that offer fewer advanced placement classes, fewer elective offerings, fewer extracurricular activities. And so students have fewer things that they can describe that they've been involved in because their schools haven't been providing them. So one of the key goals that we have for implementation of the new federal education law that the President signed in December, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is that states will focus on equitable access to opportunity in all schools. It shouldn't matter the zip code whether or not you get access to advanced coursework or art and music or other opportunities that constitute a well-rounded education. And so we think that's an important part of shifting the conversation to putting testing in perspective as one among multiple measures of student performance, both as we think about K-12 performance and as we think about college. One of the other things we focused on, we just held an event to recognize states that have adopted a seal of biliteracy. So one of the other elements of, we think, of a well-rounded education is the opportunity to learn multiple languages. And so we have 20-plus states now that have adopted a seal of biliteracy to recognize students who are bilingual or even multilingual. And we think that's another good way that states can help give students another type of recognition that they could use as part of the college admissions process. On the second question about resources for organizations that are doing community engagement work, we have a number of grant programs, our TRIO grants and our Gear Up grants that are designed around colleges providing services to first-generation students, but also working with high schools and middle schools to make sure that students get on the path to college. We also have been encouraging universities to use their work-study dollars to support service activities. And some schools tend to use their work-study dollars mostly for service to the school. And that's important. You know, we need folks to do work in the library and so forth. But schools could be using those work-study dollars to support community service, public service activities, particularly to help low-income students commit their time to those public service activities instead of having another campus job. And so that's one of the measures that we think universities can take, and we try to celebrate when they do.
I'll just add, our office, our White House initiative has a 25-year history, and last year we celebrated our 25-year anniversary. And it was really an opportunity for us to have a national conversation about what it means to invest in our community. We could have easily just had a party at the White House and called it a day because you know Latinos know how to throw good parties. But we really issued a national call to action, and we asked the public and private sector that question: what is your role? The federal government and the Department of Ed and what they're doing to invest in education, what is your role? How can we create partnerships? How can we leverage these community partnerships that could really have an impact? And we ended up, President Obama announced 150 commitments to action that came in, totaling over $335 million. And it's just an example of how communities came together. And I'll give you an example. El Monte, California, they have a commitment to action. They're working with their local Chamber of Commerce. They're working with the local bank to provide students with a savings account because they were realizing in that community that they had a high dropout rate, so they wanted to get at the heart of what was really happening in their high schools. And so financial literacy became something that the community really rallied around. And it's just an example of how, in addition to what the Department of Education is doing, how can we encourage and use some of the models we know are working that are providing key mentoring services? How can we use that and say and approach our local philanthropic partners and our local private sector partners? So I'm really proud of that work because I really think it helps us shift the conversation to it's a shared responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's not just what Secretary King and the President are doing, but it's really what are our community leaders doing to invest in our community, especially when you think about the growing Latino demographic in this country. And you think about the contributions that we have made and will continue to make in the future. Just by 2050, we're going to account for 60% of the population growth. So we need a community that is prepared and ready to conquer that future.
We have time for a couple more questions. I think we had one up here. If you can step up to the mic and we'll take the lady over there.
I'd like to thank you all, the distinguished panel, and I'd like to thank the students, applaud you for making the right decision to go to school. That's the best choice you can make. As for myself, I didn't finish high school, but now I'm in college, my second year. I'm a 3.8 GPA, but the transition I made is different. For an older student, the transition I made is different. And like you spoke of diversity, there's quite a few of us, such as myself, who came from prison to college. So now we're seeking the education that we weren't taught to look for at home. So I'm just wondering what type of resources and programs will you be implementing to help us bridge that? Because there's quite a few students at East LA College, that's where I go to. I'm also in student government, trying to learn. And as far as paying for books, it's outrageous, the prices. I have to work part-time and then go to school full-time. It's very difficult, can't afford it. So I'm wondering what type of programs and what type of resources are you going to be implementing to help older students as myself who are transitioning from prison to college?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And admire what you're doing. I think one of the things that we've got to think about as a country is today's college student is different maybe than what some people have in their minds as a college student. Today, many college students are working adults. Many college students are folks who graduated from high school quite a while ago and are returning to school. And so we've got to think differently about the supports, and I think universities have a responsibility to think differently about the supports. A few things that we're doing that are important to identify. The President has ensured an increase in Pell Grants. Pell Grants have increased by more than $1,000, and now just over $5,700 for Pell Grants. And we've proposed to Congress indexing Pell Grants to inflation long term so that Pell Grants can continue to grow because the costs do go up. And things like books are a burden for students, and we want to make sure that Pell Grants can account for a larger share of the cost. The President also, through the federal direct loan program, has been able to put $60 billion to students and taxpayers that otherwise would have gone to banks. And we think that's an important investment that's been made, but we'd like to see even more investment, as I mentioned, the America's College Promise as a way to invest. The last thing I mentioned particularly about the issue of education for folks who have been incarcerated. Two things that we're doing. One is in the mid-90s, Congress made a terrible mistake, and was one of many mistakes that were made around mass incarceration. But Congress made the decision to deny Pell Grants to folks who are incarcerated. And it was a mistake then, it's a mistake now. The result is that you miss out on giving people the opportunity to get their lives on a better path. And the result is, we know, if you've taken any kind of education program in prison, you are 43% less likely to return to prison. So we know the evidence is overwhelming that folks who have an opportunity to get an education while incarcerated do better when they return to the community. So what the President has done through our Higher Education Act authorities, we've launched a pilot initiative. 69 universities around the country, serving 12,000 students. A pilot initiative where those universities are partnering with prisons to offer higher education to folks who are incarcerated through the Pell program. We call it Second Chance Pell. And our hope is that will demonstrate to Congress the importance of reversing the mistake they made in the mid-90s and doing what the President's proposed, which is restoring access to Pell for folks who are incarcerated. We also are working on a partnership with colleges and universities about fair chances and making sure that students' criminal background, criminal records, are not used as an obstacle to admission to college. Because we have many colleges in this country, unfortunately, that use students' arrest record or prior convictions as a basis to immediately reject the student. And they're missing out on folks' talent, folks who've paid their debt to society and deserve a second chance. And so we've partnered with a group of universities to commit to change those policies. And the President has begun the work of changing those policies within the federal government in terms of employment. So I'm so glad you raised this issue, because we think this is a hugely important one, and really a question about our values as a country, and do we believe in second chances?
We're running out of time. Let me do a quick time check. Kavika, we have time for a few more questions, and then we're going to make sure we answer all of the questions. We're going to make sure we get all of your information and answer all of them, but we're going to continue with the line.
Right.
Hello, my name is Monique Aguirre. I'm from Roy Ball Learning Center, and Gear Up told me about this. So, okay, the first thing I want to comment on is, as was said before about the transition from high school to college. I understand that it's our responsibility and our initiative to start and be like, oh, I want to join this workshop. So you take the stand to go for your education. But I noticed that I'm really enrolled in AP classes and honors. So I noticed that one time I took a regular class and I noticed it was just not AP at all. And what I really noticed is the teacher. And I'm not complaining about teachers. I know they go through their credentials and all that. But what I really believe is that as a base for us, how we learn from our parent guardians or our mothers, Mom, how do you fold this, like that? I believe that's important for most Hispanics because we have no one to look up to, whether they don't have parents that graduated. So I believe that most of so half of the students I know are APs and they're, looking forward into college. The other half literally is just ignored. They just get their A through G requirements and they're out. So therefore, what you said back to community college, that they go through community college, but they really don't finish it. So I think as a person who pays the teachers, or I don't know what it is, what would be your outlook on the teachers? Because if they're the base, they're the one teaching us. I believe, I think not that they should be looked at, but I think they're the starting point for our education. So as my question is, oh my God, I lost it.
I got you.
Thank you. No, that's great. That's a good question.
Yeah, look, two thoughts. One, we need great teachers. And having a great teacher can make a huge difference. It can be a life and death difference for students. It was for me. And so, we've got to work as a country to make sure that teaching is a profession that folks want to go into. We've got to make sure that teachers are well paid, that their salaries are competitive with other salaries that you can get as a college graduate, so that teaching is attractive. We've got to make sure the working conditions in schools are good so that teachers want to stay. Right? If you're a school, if your roof is leaking, if there are rodents running across the floor, you're not going to want to stay as a teacher. So we've got to make sure the working conditions are good. And we've got to make sure that teachers are getting good professional development, support, and evaluation, right? That that as a profession, right, we've got to make sure that teachers are have time to collaborate with their colleagues, have good feedback from their principal, and feel accountable for helping their students, right? So it shouldn't be that some kids are getting are learning about college opportunities and other kids aren't in the same school. That's wrong, right? And so we have a policy responsibility to try to change that. At the federal level, we only account for about 10% of the funding in education, right? Most of the funding comes from the state and local level. So we use incentives to try to prod sometimes states to pay more attention to some of these issues. And we're going to use this new Every Student Succeeds Act, this new law, to push states to think about how do you make sure that every teacher is effective and that all kids have access to the best teaching. It shouldn't be that the best teachers end up only in some communities and not others, right? And the last thing I'll mention is around counseling, which is another huge issue, whether or not students have access to school counselors to talk about the college admissions process. We did a study, Alex mentioned the civil rights data collection. 1.6 million students go to high school where there's a sworn law enforcement officer in the school and no school counselor. Right, what does that say about us as a society and what we value and what we believe about students? That we would let students go to a school where there's no counselor, but there is a police officer, right? Yes. That's something we need to change. We need to make sure that every student has access to a counselor. And access to a counselor means a counselor with a reasonable load, not one counselor who's supposed to work with 500 students. Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Jackson. I'm a non-traditional senior at UCLA from South Los Angeles. I identify as Afro-Latino. So me and my siblings are all Latino. And growing up, college education was not possible for us. We find it very difficult to go back to school. I'm 30 years old. As I said, I'm non-traditional, and I found it very difficult to go back to school. We find it very discouraging. So how are we investing in Latino students who left the sidelines, who basically didn't finish high school due to lack of support, and how can we implement them back into the educational system? What kind of initiatives can we do to support them to go back to school? Because they should also have equal opportunity to go back to school, even if they didn't finish high school.
Right.
Like, why didn't they finish high school?
That's right. That's right. Alex, you want to talk about some of the bright spots around that?
So we are really working to, one, bring attention to that narrative that it's never too late if you want to go back and get your education, right? But how can we provide you with the resources you need to be successful? There's an office at the Department of Education, our Office of Career and Adult Training Education, that has some key partnerships across the country that are helping us target students like you to talk about the resources and the grant opportunities that are offered at the department. There are some bright spots across the country that have demonstrated progress in trying to work with our adult learners. So, I mean, I'll just say that it's a priority. We have some organizations that I think that we can use as models to help us continue to have this conversation, but I really do commend you. It is a long journey, but it's important for you to talk about, you know, how it's your process and what you've been going through so that we can kind of help have this conversation and make sure that it continues to be a priority in everything that we're doing at the Department of Education to ensure when we talk about college access, we also make sure we incorporate the non-traditional learners and the resources that they need.
Yeah, and the thing I would add is the President's proposed significant investment around what some people sometimes call disconnected youth. I would call opportunity youth, right? And the President's point on this is if we invest in students having education and job training opportunities and internships, right, those investments will be paid back through the opportunity those young people will then have to get good jobs and contribute as, you know, as taxpayers, right? And so it's not, we shouldn't think of it as an expense or as a burden. We should think of it as an investment that we're making in our long-term future. So we've made some investments around opportunity youth. We've got some programs with the Department of Labor that try to help students work on their high school equivalency at the same time as they have a job that helps them support themselves, and then they're able to transition into college. But we need more investment there, and we need to persuade Congress that this is an investment worth making. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Edith, and I'm a junior nursing student here at Mount St. Mary's University. My question is, as many of you guys know, deportation rates are very high right now, and especially as Latinos, many of us could live with the fear that our parents could get deported any moment. Unfortunately, it does happen to several students, several Latinos. It happened to me back in 2008. Due to that, I had to move to Guatemala in 2009 and came back in 2012 at 17. I came back, and I remember, like, in high school, I went back second semester. Like, they placed me as a junior second semester. I had no clue what SATs were. I had no clue what FAFSA was. And senior year, I moved to a different high school. I learned a little bit about FAFSA. I went to the workshops, and there was several times that I went, and every time I would get to, like, the parental status, I was stuck. And so my question here is, what can be done? It wasn't until I got to Mount St. Mary's University that I learned about, like, independent student status, and I had to go through, like, a process where I have to write 3 letters, one from my uncle stating that, yes, I financially support myself, one from my pastor, one from me. And so as a senior, I would think, how am I going to pay for college? How am I going to go to college? Am I even going to be able to go to college? It wasn't until I found out about that. So what can be done for those students who, are left behind by those deported parents? That's my question.
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. Alex should talk about the guide that we have for undocumented students, but I want to make 2 points. One is we need comprehensive immigration reform, and that's right. And part of the challenge for the president has been that Congress has not done their job on comprehensive immigration reform. And so we've had to, as an administration, try to do what we can to address the issue without Congress. And so that's why DACA is so important and has been something that we at the department have worked to support but it's not a substitute for comprehensive immigration reform. And so the president continues. Let me make one other point. I also believe that our students who are undocumented should be able to get federal financial aid. Now that requires Congress to act. I also think undocumented students should be able to get state financial aid, and that often requires state legislatures to act. And unfortunately, some states have been unwilling to make that investment, which again is short-sighted because these are our students that are part of our community. In terms of students of parents who are undocumented, one of the things we've tried to do is to make the information clearer. We've tried to do that with some of the supporting materials around the FAFSA. It's one of the reasons school counselors are so important. And we've tried to provide tools to help school counselors and teachers better understand what the rules are. Because sometimes people are confused about what the rules are and give students bad information. I've talked to students, I'm sure you know students like this, who've been told, oh, if your parents are undocumented, you can't get financial aid, which isn't true, but is a reflection of some confusion. But Alex should talk about the guide.
Yeah, absolutely. The guide, well, there's several resources that the Department of Education has put forward. So we have a page dedicated just to this topic. And it's a guide for undocumented students on different grant opportunities or scholarships we're seeing from organizations like the Dream US, who's a partner. We've been working with some of the colleges and universities that are starting to launch their Latino immigrant centers so that they're kind of helping us inform us of some of the partners that are coming to the table to invest. But the Department of Education has a page dedicated just to resources. And one of the things that our Federal Student Aid Office has done is a fact sheet. It's in Spanish and English because we get a lot of these technical questions, and we've tried to really simplify it for the student and for the parent on how do you fill out your FAFSA, or where can you call to get support if you're stuck on a question. So it's also part of the guide that we've included for the Graduate 2.0 is those types of resources. So I'm happy to point you to that website, but we've have it on the White House Initiative site. And we've got other partners like the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute that are helping us identify the scholarship resources. And I mentioned Memphis, Tennessee. One of our commitments came from Christian Brothers University, and it's just an example of a university that has made a commitment to supporting their undocumented students. So we try to highlight the good work we know is happening for our students and trying to really push the conversation on how we can continue to replicate that. They offered $11 million for scholarships, and since they announced it, they've been able to attract new partners to the table. So as Secretary King mentioned, until we have comprehensive immigration reform, we have to have conversations on who are our partners that we can work with to make sure that you have the support and that all of our undocumented and our DACA students have the support necessary. But Federal Student Aid has really a great document, and it's linked to our guide on some of the technical questions we've received that I think could be very helpful. And I think it's important for you to share your story with other students and even with us so that we can use that as an example and help amplify it for other students to know about how you were able to kind of address the barriers you were facing.
So we've run out of time, but we're going to allow 2 more questions, and I'm sorry, we're going to answer the remaining questions. We're going to allow 2 more questions at the same time. If you could just ask them back to back. We'll add 1 more round of answers, and we're going to have to close up the conversation. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Oscar Cruz. I am a student at Cal State LA and ELAC. I am 20 years old. I am head of household of six people. I work 43.75 hours a week. And my concern is, as a AB 540 student, is because we're talking something I've been concerned about is the election. If I myself, as an AB 540 student, what I'm concerned is, will DACA continue even after the presidential debate? Something I do fear is, I guess, like my confidentiality. If it does not continue, then what happens to that information that the government holds?
Okay, so let's get the other question asked, and then we're gonna do a final round of responses.
Thank you for coming today. My name is Karina. I attend here at the Mount. I'm a senior. My interest in this is that my sister, I'm a first generation. My sister will be considered the second generation. But I noticed that when I first started school, I had the biggest difficulty was filling out my FAFSA form, specifically because my mom, when I asked my mom, oh, like I need your taxes, I need them right away. Like I was panicked, I was panicking because I didn't know how to fill it out. And there was workshops only provided like on the weekends. And my mom and my dad are like Hispanics, of course, but they only speak Spanish. And I know that workshops that are provided or stuff that are sent home are usually in English. And I know that workshops are provided for students, but I want to know if there's, especially because of this program, Graduate 2.0, I want to know if there's going to be any workshops implemented for parents specifically, because they're our foundation, and I feel that if our parents are not informed and we're sort of informed, it's like we're not understanding each other. Our parents are like, what are you like? ¿Qué necesitas? Like they're not there. They're like mentally not there because they don't know about it. So now that my sister's starting she's currently applying to universities and colleges, and she's asking me for help because she can't go to my parents. But I feel like if my parents were more informed about programs or requirements or like this college planning guide to success, I think they'd be more aware of the things that my sister needs for them to have it ready for her and to be there with her on the laptop and the computer and filling out the forms. So I just want to kind of know, like, what is this program providing, not just for students, but for parents?
Do you want to talk about the parent piece of the guide?
So we are doing a lot of promotion. We always ask students, how do your parents get information? And many of them say Spanish radio, Univision. So we're doing a lot of work with our media partners to really amplify this guide. But I really do hope that the work that the department has done to simplify FAFSA, we can kind of change that narrative, because one of the changes that's included this year is you don't have to estimate your taxes. There's a tool that will help you kind of transfer the data directly from the IRS from your taxes. So I was just on Despierta America yesterday explaining this because it's so important. I had the same conversation with my parents. They're like, ¿Pa qué quieres los taxes? They thought, I was asking them for their social security, and they were just like so like nervous. What are you doing with this information? So we hope that this tool will really help. Our office has the opportunity to do outreach across the country. So one of the big things for us is the early FAFSA, start applying now. We have a lot of partners because we can't get to every community that we're working with to really help us promote how to have workshops with parents. We're really creative. We work with everyone. The taco trucks are really important in our conversations. We can get information there to parents. That's the first stop I make when I go into a community, because they know everything in the neighborhood, right? But just know that our office is going to continue to really amplify the guide. We have great examples of parent engagement models that we've seen across the country, and there's a person at the Department of Ed that works with us closely who's in charge of family engagement. So we partner a lot with other folks because we really need to make sure that it gets into the hands. And like I said, it's in Spanish, and it's important that we have these conversations. So you'll see a lot through the amplification on social media. And then I really rely on you all to really help us continue to push it out and letting people know that it's available. So if you can do me a favor, and because we are housed at the Department of Education, we do provide homework assignments. But if you can share it with 5 people that aren't here, 5 of your friends, share the link, let them know it's available. That really helps us kind of really make sure that we continue to amplify as much as possible.
So let me make three quick points on those last 2 questions. So as federal appointees, Alex and I can't talk about the 2016 election, right? Because our job is to do the work of government, so we can't be involved in the politics of the election. But I will say that the president has made clear that he believes Congress has a responsibility around comprehensive immigration reform, and we think they should come back and do that now after the election when they come back. And if they don't do it then we need to continue, all of us together, to keep making that case going forward, whoever's in Congress and whoever the next president is, because it's the right thing to do for the country. Second, I wanted to make a point about the access to information not stopping at the college application process. We know that the students who are in college, you probably aren't quite thinking yet about any loans that you have and how you will repay them, but soon enough you will start to think about that, especially when the first bill comes. So a couple things you should know about. For many of you who are going into public service, for example, those of you who are going to become teachers, there's public service loan forgiveness, where your loans can be forgiven based on your commitment to a career in public service. There's teacher loan forgiveness programs that are specifically designed for folks who are teaching in high-needs communities to be able to have their loans forgiven. There's something called income-driven repayment that's available to everyone that allows you to cap how much you are paying on your federal loans at 10% of your income, which, if you're in particular careers, that may make sense, particularly early in your career. So that's important to start thinking about. You're probably going to get a note from the college about your financial counseling that you're going to need to do before you graduate. Take that seriously and make sure you understand the information. You do not want to have the first time you think about this stuff be when the first bill comes, right? You want to plan around that. And the last point I want to make, so grateful to Mount St. Mary's for hosting this. And I just want to say about this. I want to say about Alex, just what an incredible example she is of not only Mount St. Mary's, but what all of us should hope for in a public servant, in that she, in leading the White House initiative on educational excellence for Hispanics on behalf of the president, is a voice for Latino communities across the country. And she is a voice for kids like her and families like hers. And she chose to pursue a career that allows her to give back and to pay forward the opportunities that she was given. And I just think she's a tremendous example. And I'm so grateful to be here with her in particular. So thank you, Alex, for your leadership.
Alex, I don't know if you want to provide some final concluding thoughts. We've come to the end of the program, and so I want to thank both of you, Secretary King and Alejandra. I don't know if you want to add any concluding thoughts.
I just want to tell you to reach higher, continue to dream big. I never thought I would be where I'm at, but it was really through education that paved the way for me, and I want to tell the stories of all those students and parents that are in this country working day in and day out to make it better. So it's an honor to be here at Mount St. Mary's. Thank you for the opportunity to be back home. And just really don't let anyone set any limits on you, and dream big and reach higher.
I also want to take a minute to thank you to Secretary King. I think you're an example to follow as a Latino, as a person that has persevered and committed to education. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the team that made it all possible, the Me Too team, and of course the folks at Mount St. Mary's University. We've come to an end. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias, Arturo.
And also, if we get some feedback from the young students here, we're going to get a camera guy outside with some pretty